The exhibition, A Thriving Artists Community, features local artists from the Inland Empire. And so we're featuring artists who are in that photography exhibition in this series of online artist talks. So just a little bit about, if you're not unfamiliar with Zoom, you want to, in the top right, you can pick what view you want. You're probably going to want the speaker view, and that will focus on whoever is speaking. And then if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a little button that says chat. And if you have questions for Conchi, please type them into the chat box there whenever you want throughout the talk, and then we'll do a question and answer at the end. And then if you want to end the meeting, you'll have leave the meeting, you have a little button in the bottom right if you want to exit. And all the other buttons you probably won't really need. All right, so Conchi Sanford is joining us from Chino, California. And so it's kind of nice. We've had our artist speakers have been kind of mapping out the life of Sam Maloof. So he was born in Chino. He and Alfreda, when they got married, they lived in Ontario, which is where our first speaker was joining us from, Gina Lawson-Egan. And then they moved to Rancho Cucamonga, of course, or Alta Loma, which is where Lauren Verdugo and Jacqueline Bell Johnson were joining us from before. So a little bit about Conchi. She got her Master's of Fine Arts from Claremont Graduate University. She's a professor of art and art history at Crafton Hills College, Mount San Jacinto College, and Norco College. She just recently had a solo show at the Progress Gallery in Pomona, and she's shown at the Torrance Art Museum, University of La Verne College of Law, South Bay Contemporary. She's also a curator and has curated exhibitions throughout the Los Angeles area. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Conchi. Thank you, Conchi.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Let me just... You guys see me okay? I hope so. I am talking to you guys from my studio here. I have a few pieces up that we're going to go through with the slides. Like Seth said, I am a curator. I've actually curated 3 distinct shows. One of them was the 50/50 art show. I've curated more shows than 3, but these are the 3 that I've been traveling. And so one is Artists as Scientists, and I've also set up to work with someone else to work on a curation that will hopefully soon be traveled and seen. I'm a little bit nervous, so a little shaky. Let's see, about me. I have historically, you're going to see, we're going to talk about some of my pieces that basically tap into my own history as a military kid, raised on military bases, and then went to school for 12 years at private Catholic school. And so all of that, of course, influenced my life, and growing up in the 80s had a significant impact. So a lot of my work is focused on things that I'm dealing with, that I've dealt with as a woman, and things that people are still dealing with today. And some of it I poke fun at. So hopefully there's nothing too offensive in my show. So let's start the slides.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, so the first piece here is the Beast. This is actually the piece from my MFA thesis show in 2011 when I graduated. I was, I think I was almost 40, graduating from graduate school. And I decided to undertake the wrapping of the semi and its trailer. This one's actually Freightliner. And I also wrapped a Peterbilt. This was a 50-foot trailer that we had to cut down during installation because it was too big to fit in the gallery. And so you can actually walk up to it. It is the size of a truck, of the actual physical dimensions of a big rig. Tires, everything. And so it's hanging like marionette strings from the ceiling, and it questions consumerism and how we deliver our goods, receive our goods, and how we kind of like don't look at it and we see through it. And so this was the beginning of me working with plastics and clear plastic with no color. So let's go on to the next one. Next slide. Okay, so then I moved on to the confessional series. This is a series of work where people would get into the confessional and either talk to someone else. Some people would get in them and meditate, which I thought was quite fascinating. This one, we see two of the same confessional, and it's the idea of getting into the confessional and talking to someone else, kind of revealing a part of yourself and taking yourself out of the constraints of technology. Because as you can see, there is no technology in these, and you actually have to talk to somebody. I wanted to take my experience with being in a confessional and apply it here, because my experience being in a confessional was always positive because I like to talk. And so whenever I would go to confession, I would have a person there to talk to me whenever I wanted to. And so let's go to the next slide, because this next slide is about the confessional series also. So this one is called The Doctor Is In. This was one of the final confessionals where you actually get into it, you lay down and you speak to each other through a long tube, and you get involved in the conversation. It's really interesting how these work, because a lot of people tend to kind of creep up on them like animals do, checking it out, making sure it's safe. Can I sit on it? And then once they're in it, they spend a lot of time in there. And I'm always really surprised. So let's move on to the next one, because the next one's part of the confessional series also. And here we have, on the left is another version of the confessional series, standing up. You get in, the light turns on, just like a regular confessional, and you talk to each other through the tubes. I've never actually recorded anything in the confessionals. I would eventually like to, but I don't want to inhibit people's experience with it. The one on the right is part of it's actually a protest piece. I don't often do protest pieces, and this one hit home for me. This particular piece, for me, it's on my right, the teepee. It is made out of plastics. It's a protest piece against the Dakota Access Pipeline. And the bottom part is actually tar paper that we put on the roofs of our houses, but it's made out of oil. All of the products in the teepee are made out of oil. Even the markers that were used to write on the inside, I asked people to come in and actually write on the plastic, from the inside, from the outside, using chalk on the tar paper. and tell me what they felt about this piece and what they felt about the Dakota Access Pipeline. Next slide, please. So this is part of my beginning process of working with small resin pieces. These three pieces were probably my favorite. The larger one on the right was in several shows and has been sold. The two on the left, I still have. They're very personal to me. The one in the upper left is called Mick, like Mick Jagger, because it reminds me of Mick Jagger's lips. The one on the bottom reminds me of a person walking through life. A lot of people have their own ideas about what they see in these, but I make them very fluidly, painting directly into the wet resin, and coming up with a lot of different approaches while I'm working. So it's very spontaneous, where the plastic pieces are very methodical, they're very planned out. Here, if an accident happens and it looks cool, then great. If it doesn't, then we scrap it and move on, and usually build it into my next piece. So let's look at the next piece. So here we have this slide and the next slide show a series that I was working on. I'm still working on it, but I put it on a shelf for a little while. It's called Immigrant Voices. The first one is Traspasando el Desierto, and the other one, second one with the blue in it, is Tarde o Temprano. These two pieces reflect on the fact that all people, from the moment that they're born and they start to speak or try to speak, they all have a voice, and we should listen. Everybody has a different reason, excuse me, for coming here. And being that I am first generation American and my mother is an immigrant, I feel connected to the stories that I hear people tell me about how they had an idea about coming to America, and then they wanted to eventually get here. And so I've taken these stories and taken an excerpt from them and put them into a piece of art. So the next one, please. And then sometimes not all of the stories are beautiful and wonderful. The one on the left is called Let Them Eat Cake, because it references this idea of a beautiful life in a new country, and then getting here and having to work a crappy job, excuse my language, after you've received your degree in medicine, or you're a physical therapist, and then you come here and you're a dishwasher. And so it's starting over, but it's also having to have a positive outlook at all times, even when you're being treated unfairly and treated not very kindly. So, and this has been going on a long time, you know, since the day of the gold rush. And so Aztec gold reflects on this idea, again, of things being beautiful and gold and wonderful and all this promise, and then getting here and it being fool's gold, so to speak. So next slide, please. This one's called Pray, and it actually was a piece that I was working on, and it ended up coming together. I made the resin top piece separate from the bottom piece. And when I realized that the top piece kind of looked like a bird, and when you zoom in on it, it to me looked like it was this bird coming in to attack or grab something. It also happened around the same time that there was a hawk in my backyard, pecking off some of the birds. And so I decided to document it. And the red in the bottom is kind of supposed to be a reference to this, animal life. And then the bird coming in, survival of the fittest, so to speak, I guess you would say. But I called it prey. Next slide, please. And this one is called Amor Compartido. Again, there's visually a lot going on in this painting. It is paint upon resin upon resin. It's resin that I created elsewhere in other things that didn't work out, and they went into the bucket of scrap resin pieces. And then when I was working on this, I laid them out and I saw this. These faces, this kiss happening. And I also see other things, other faces. I see a dead bunny rabbit in there too. So everybody sees different things, which is fine. And I like my work to be a little bit funny in a way, sensitive and endearing. And so we have this piece. Next piece, please. Now this one is part of two pieces that went together. Originally, this one is called Love and Consequences. And I think it kind of looked like, this kind of bothered me, it looked like some kind of cartoon character. And I ended up disassembling it and using the pieces for other parts after the shows that it was in. It was actually in 2 shows, and then I disassembled it because I liked the way the green turned out. I just didn't like the piece. And so it talks about how we have love in our life, and when we jump in or we have other situations that happen in our life, there are always consequences. And so when I wanted to make a pair piece, so a piece that would pair with another piece, and that would be the next piece. So this one's called the Purple Dildo, and it coincides with Love and Consequences. With Love and Consequences, you end up with this piece. And this piece actually is in my studio in the background. And it's actually it came from a really funny story that I had with a bunch of girlfriends. And we were joking around about some stuff that had happened in my first marriage. And I ended up making this piece kind of as a way of saying thank you to my girlfriends for always being there. Thank you to my family for always being there when I was going through a really difficult time. And so it kind of plays upon this idea that there are these things that happen between women and happen between family that provide us with support that not everybody sees or acknowledges all the time. This one is called The 7 Deadly Sins. Makes reference to the fact that, of course, the 7 deadly sins, everybody pretty much knows of them. They're talked about in so many different storylines, but it also goes back historically. And whenever whenever a kingdom wanted to gain the support or provide support to someone who was abnormally ruthless, they would allow them to do what they needed to do to get a result. So in this case, I reference people like Vlad the Impaler, Genghis Khan, and then when it wasn't good for, I guess, their the way they are seen in society, then that person gets condemned for the actions that they have taken. Granted, they are not good actions, but it goes to show how far, or how far we have come, or how far we haven't come. But we chastise those after we aren't happy with what they are doing. But we are the ones that put them where they are. And that's all I'm going to say about politics. Let's move on. And then this one's funny. Mamacita. This one is all about the idea of walking down the street and somebody turning to you and treating you like a piece of meat and calling you a mamacita. First time that ever happened to me, I was 15 years old, and I learned to say some really foul things to those people. Now I've realized when I'm older that those things shouldn't be said at all. And but this makes fun of that moment in history, that moment in my lifetime where I learned to actually stand up for myself as a young woman and tell somebody in a not so nice way that they cannot treat me that way. So this next one. This one is called Octopussy, and it references James Bond's movies, particularly Octopussy. I wanted to create something that reminded me of an octopus, and that name just kept going over and over again. And the conversations that I was having with some of my art colleagues and other people about how women are portrayed in movies and how they were portrayed in movies when I was younger is in a way insensitive, because essentially it looks like a pair of legs stuck into a wall where you only see the hindsight of this person. These are supposed to be my legs. They are modeled after my bottom and my bottom half of my body. And so it is a way of looking at it and saying, look, this isn't who I am. This isn't who we are. And we need to start changing the conversation. It's a really pretty piece too, by the way. So before the Purple Dildo and Octopussy, we had sculptural paintings. This is when I started to remove myself from the canvas. I didn't want to be constrained by the size, the physicality of the canvas. And then I started making these shapes that ended up being sculptural paintings. And there are sculptural paintings because I am able to pour the resin, and in the 10 minutes, literally 10 minutes before it starts to harden, I have 10 minutes to work in the paint before it starts to get hard, and the gestures are not my own. It's a very intuitive process, and it is very, very fast. So next painting, please. So this is where I ended up going with some of the sculptural paintings. This piece is very small. It's 6 inches by 6 inches, but there's so much happening in it. Every artist experiments. I experimented a little bit with poured painting. I didn't want to do much more than the smaller pieces because it was way too hard to control. And too much cracking was happening. I would have had to learn a whole new system of making art. And I just, I didn't want to constrain myself anymore. Next one. So this is where we ended up. So the 6 by 6, excuse me, the 6 by 6 size is something that I do a lot because I'm in something called a 6x6 show at the Rochester Center for the Arts. And every year I send them 3 to 5 pieces that they auction off for their fundraiser. And you're able to go online and buy some pieces. These 2 pieces ended up at the separate but still together art show. The one on left is called 6x6 because it references the 6 feet that we're supposed to stand away from each other. And the one on the right is called Saturn because Leslie Pinizzotto named it that. And so these two pieces are in the separate but still together art show at Studio C in Claremont. Next slide, please. So this one is called The River Runs Through Us. It's an ode to Dale Chihuly. I'm very inspired by his works. I love his work. I love his glass. But I'm also interested in working in different environments. This is modeled after the Bellagio ceiling that is no longer made out of glass. It's actually been replaced with resin pieces. So I didn't know that until after I did this piece, but I found it quite fascinating. One of the reasons I work with resin is because it's lightweight, it's easy to move. I can move it basically by myself. I make all my work to be moved by myself. If I have help, great. If I don't have help, then I can do it no matter what. But I always seem to have help. And so have a big family. And these pieces, like I said, it talks about Dale Chihuly, a river runs through us in a way that the art runs through us and life takes us in different directions. Next slide, please. So these 2 were in my solo show last year. The blue one, you can't really see it in this image, but it has glass in it. I like to put in glass every once in a while. It's called White Noise. It's a take on a drawing that I had created. And this drawing, I've created it over and over and over again. And it's actually a woman screaming and there's nobody there to hear her. And so sometimes as a woman, I feel like I'm saying the same thing somebody else is. And because I don't have a penis, nobody's listening to me. And so that is what the White Noise is all about. And the one on the right, the black and yellow one, is called Pounding Pavement. And it actually talks about going out there and having to pound pavement, so to speak. For all the younger folks out there, pounding pavement is basically going out door to door, trying to find a job. I've done it so many times. It's one of the reasons why I went back to school to get my MFA, was because I was done getting passed over. I had more education. But since I was a woman, I was being passed over, or for any other reason. I was told once I wasn't hireable because I wasn't old enough. So anyways, but it's all about how life changes. It's a positive piece, actually. It's all about how life changes and it takes you down a road, and sometimes the road veers off in different directions and you just go with it. Another thing I wanted to say about these 2 pieces is they are about 4 feet tall each. They hang from the ceiling. They also are French pleated on the back so that they can hang away from the wall. They are paintings. So they're not just resin. They're actual, I consider them paintings, but they are not on any form of panel. They hang by themselves without having to be painted on a canvas or a panel. Next painting, please, or next piece. And this one is called Sold. It's Ode to Yayoi Kusama. She influenced my work a great deal, and I wanted to make a piece that referenced that. It was completely yellow, and I had people come in and grab some stickers and place the stickers on the piece. I love making interactive work. It makes me happy and feel a lot of joy when I see people interacting with my work. This particular piece, people stuck the red dots on the front, on the back. I had nothing to do with that. I just created the piece. It was also glow in the dark. So it would glow in the dark in the evenings when we would turn the lights out. And this was the final version of this piece. And I think that's the last slide.
Yes. Yep. Okay, so I'm gonna stop the slideshow here. And so everyone who's watching, feel free to add to our chat conversation here with any questions that you have for Conchi, and I will try to get to as many of them as we can. We've got a few questions here so far, but yeah, everybody else, give us your questions. Go for it. Okay, so let's see. There's a question from Kendall about the Octopussy piece. He wants to hear if you could describe the physical process of art making with this piece.
Yes, I can. So I'm gonna walk over to the piece right now. I hope we don't it doesn't come off too bad. But this piece, as you can see, it's very physical. It goes all the way up. There is, and you can actually, because some of it started to pull apart from moving it so much, you can actually side of it. Use plexi, and you can see some of it up there. Can you? Yeah. So I use plexi. I manipulate the plexi through heat. I have a special machine that allows me to do that. And I create an understructure, and I drill a lot of holes, zip tie it together. I'm gonna make this sound really easy. And then the process for the painting is completely separate. So the process for the painting is like this piece right here. This one's in process. This is actually, I want to say 12 coats of resin. And so it's really hard. Like that thing's not breaking. It's not going anywhere. I mean, yeah, if you dropped it from really high up, it would shatter, but it's not going to go anywhere. And so what ends up happening is through this process of layering upon layering of resin, they adhere to each other. I work in what you call the in-between time, where they say don't touch the resin. That's when I touch the resin, and it comes off like taffy, and it stretches, and it's it's probably the part I hate the most because I go through so many gloves. But it sticks to everything, and it is very malleable, but because it's very malleable, I'm able to get this process that happens on this piece. And even on this piece, where this ends up looking like skin, and it gets pulled taut over. And so I use colors, I use spray paint. Each one has a different effect. Some of it has a bad effect. When I first started messing around with resin, I think I almost like blew up the house because I mixed a paint into and a chemical into the resin that I wasn't supposed to. And so curiosity and me thinking, oh, this is gonna look awesome. And then that happened. And then I looked again and I was like, oh, this is bad. So when I went back in, it was bubbling up. I took it outside, it off gassed, and it looked really gross. So I never used it. But my husband said it was awesome. And I said, okay, you can keep that. I think that's it for that one. So the layers of orange, there are multiple layers. I have to work on it because I hung it from the ceiling. It's not supposed to be hung from the ceiling. The weight of it is pulling down on it, so it started to kind of rip apart, but it's not anything I can't fix. As long as the understructure is still intact, I can fix it. That's my motto. I can fix anything.
And so Kendall's also asking about what kind of paint you do use. So what kind of paint doesn't blow up your house?
I know, right? It's a good. I actually have an assortment of spray paint. Now the spray paint will do something like this. And this, where the other dyes that I use, so I have what are called pigments. I don't really like the idea of labeling myself, but if I had to label myself, I'd say I'm a but this is what I used to have. They're powder pigments, and I picked them up and I started using them in the resin. They're pretty cool. They make everything really shiny. I love shiny things, so I love pearl things. And so you get that pearl, this pearl sheen happens when you add the pigments. And then I also use what are called piñata colors. These are the best. That is what gave me those colors. Now, you're gonna laugh. I go to the 99-cent store a lot, well, not anymore because COVID, you know. And, but when I go, I pick up colored hairspray. I pick up these fake colors you can put in your hair, and I add them into the resin when I'm working. Won't blow your either. And so I use paint, spray paint. I talked about that. I talked about, there's one more thing. Oh yeah, every once in a while I'll add some acrylics, but they don't dry at the same rate as the resin. So they get trapped inside the resin without being dry. And the resin will peel off of it eventually. And it just creates a lot more work, well, for me. And so I don't particularly like it. The purple dildo was done with all spray paint. It was done, and you can see the sheen in it from the powder pigments, but you can also see how some of the colors mixed together. And the black, I don't use my black spray paint for this. I only use what's called asphaltum. So the stuff that they use to fill the cracks in your asphalt, that's what I use for my black, because it's not quite black, it's not quite gray, it's not quite brown. When the light hits it, it changes colors, but essentially it is black. And so, and it's oil-based, just like your resin. And the resin that I use Crystal Tuo, it is a crystal clear resin. I also use 326. This is sold at Reynolds. It is specifically made by Reynolds. They have a location in Hollywood. I don't drive up there. Sometimes I do. It's if they have a class. Sometimes they give free classes on their resin. But I'll order it and then they'll ship it to me, and it usually gets here the next day. Speaking of which, I have to buy some more resin.
So Deborah had a comment. She said, I really appreciate your piece, White Noise. It's very calming and pulls me in. It has a nice flow. And I'm wondering about kind of pieces like that are more abstract versus the pieces that, but it all actually has, you know, some kind of very loaded content. So you kind of go back and forth between more abstract pieces and pieces with explicit content. I'm just wondering about how your process might differ, or your thinking might differ between the abstract pieces and the more, you know, kind of content-oriented pieces.
So I usually make work for a show. The Mamacita piece was supposed to be a triptych, and it ended up being a solo piece. The second of the two pieces was this one, where it's super abstract and it doesn't have any content to it, but sometimes it does create its own content as I work on it. I have another piece like this one I thought was really cool, but it ended up being too big for the show at Studio C, and it's not done. I still have to fill some of these bubbles that were created, but this is basically, I poured some of the long elongated pieces, and then this came off of another piece, and it basically stuck to my plastic, and I pulled it off and I said, oh, that looks like a wave, and then I put it in the painting. So it's like I said, it's a lot of my work is very intuitive, and some of the stuff just kind of creeps up on me. So, and then sometimes I'm looking at old work, like the White Noise piece was not supposed to look like that at all, but I didn't want it to be for lack of a better term, I didn't want it to be in your face. I wanted people to really engage with it. I wanted people to talk about it. So like the 7 Deadly Sins, I think it's hilarious because I always think every time I look at it, I think, oh, heads will roll. And so, I mean, there's an element of poking fun. Sometimes I think art doesn't have to be that serious as long as it speaks to somebody. And I believe that my art, or I want my art to speak to everybody. I know not all my pieces are going to speak to everybody, but I want somebody to engage with at least one of my pieces and make it have an impact, have a conversation, love it, hate it. I had somebody hate one of my pieces so much that she dragged her husband away from it when I was doing very female-centered pieces. And I just thought that was really funny. Because I was like, they're gonna be talking about my piece tonight. And so whether they like it or they don't, it doesn't matter. As long as they don't walk away not remembering me. I want you to remember me. I want you to remember my work. I want it to have an impact. I want you to feel what it is to see something beautiful, ugly, grotesque. I do make art that's grotesque. I don't often show it because sometimes when people see grotesque art, it changes their perception of the artist. And so maybe eventually when I get older, I'm almost 50, so give me another 10 years. I'll start making really disgusting art. And then you guys can check back in and say, oh, wow, yeah. There's my personality is really starting to come out right now.
And so Marie wants to know where you get your inspiration from, which seems to me like it comes from a wide range of sources.
I think I'm inspired a lot by some of the really messed up things that happen in life. And then I'm also inspired by the attitude that I try to take. So there's this attitude I think of whenever I talk to people. They either have a glass half full or the glass half empty. And I push myself every day. It's not easy to see the glass half full. Because it makes things so much easier. It's like having hope and having other things in your life that make you wake up in the morning. Everybody, some people say, oh, it's my job. They pay me whatever and I go to work and that makes me happy. And some people say, life. I'm just grateful I'm still here. I'm 48. There's so many things I've done in my life. I should not be here right now. So I think a lot of people I bungee jumped. I mean, I still want to go skydiving, cliff diving, So I think life in general inspires me, and having my eyes wide open to see it and to see all these weird things happen and document them all the time. I document them in my sketchbook. So like my cat, I always talk about cats. I knew this was going to happen. I put up the canopy yesterday and the cat somehow ended up in the canopy from the tree. And then it's the cat that's afraid of me. And so I went over to help him out and he starts running around the canopy away from me. And so, and I broke out in laughter because it was just so ridiculous. If anybody was to see me running around under the canopy, they would wonder what was going on. And so those are things that I document. Like somebody else might get really angry, where I'm like, okay, whatever, you figure it out. You got in there, you can get out. So that's my inspiration.
Awesome. All right. Well, we should probably start to wrap it up here. Thank you so much, Conchi, for sharing all this with us. And so if you joined maybe not right at the beginning of the Zoom, we're recording this and we're going to post it to our YouTube channel for the Maloof. Just search the Maloof and you'll find our channel. So we'll post this video, and we also have our previous 3 talks on there. And we'll be having 3 more talks the next 3 Fridays with Kendall Johnson, David Amico, and CJ Gillick. Yeah, so any parting words, Conchi?
I keep thinking about a few things that I was already planning to say, but I know a lot of my content is really loaded and it's actually in jest because there are comments that I make all the time. And I talk about, oh, well, I'd get paid more if I was a man. I wish I was a man for the day. And I'm like, oh, no, there's a lot. And then I say, no, there's a lot of things that I get in life and get out of life because I'm a woman, because I get to see things from the perspective of a woman. And there's no other way to explain it than being happy with myself allows me to create the work that I do. And I really, really appreciate this opportunity. You don't know how much I appreciate it, Seth. This is an amazing opportunity to be in league with, or I should say, kind of on the sidelines with David Amico. He was one of my committee members when I was in graduate school, and an amazing artist. So I'm really looking forward to that talk.
Yes, me too. He was also one of my professors, and he's amazing as a professor and a painter. So I'm very excited about that one also. All right, cool. All right, well, will wish everyone a great weekend and stay safe out there. Thank you, Conchi.
Thank you very much, Seth. Have a great day.
All right. Bye, everyone.